President Trump's claim that President Obama had him wiretapped suffered a setback this week as the Republican chairman of the House and Senate Intelligence Panel said they'd seen no evidence to substantiate that. Tucker Carlson asked the president about his Twitter claim that Obama had engaged in Nixonian tactics.
Why not wait to tweet about it until you can prove it? Don't you devalue your words when you can't provide evidence?
Because the New York Times wrote about it. You know, not that I respect the New York Times. I call it the failing New York Times. But they did write on January 20th using the word wiretap. And nobody ever talks about the fact that it was in quotes. But that's a very important thing. But wiretap covers a lot of different things.
We're back with the panel. Cheryl, what's your take on the coverage of this presidential wiretap claim that remains unproven? And some anchors and commentators completely going off and saying that the President of the United States is a liar.
I think there are two good questions to be asked. One is, should he have made the statements relying on the press that, on the other hand, he says he doesn't trust? You can't really have it both ways. But there is a very legitimate question that the media should be asking as to whether there was improper surveillance of the campaign or any of his officials. And we know the track record under the Obama administration meant that they conducted unprecedented surveillance of reporters. They conducted surveillance of phone records of members of Congress, including the Senate Intelligence Committee, according to my sources. So I think there will be more information coming out, and I think those questions are legitimate media questions to ask and dig into.
So you're saying it's feasible that this happened, but you're not saying it's by any means proven.
I have no information that it happened, but I think that is a question that deserves to continue to be pursued.
What did you make of Sean Spicer in Miami and earlier saying, well, the media are ignoring crickets, he said, the other side of the story, that the same Intel chairman who we all quote about wiretapping, surveillance, and no evidence are saying they have no evidence so far of any improper collusion between Trump associates and Vladimir Putin's people?
It's actually a really good point. I mean, there is no evidence. There's been no evidence provided that there's a personal wiretap of Donald Trump's phones. There also has been no evidence provided for any number of the unsubstantiated claims put forth by anonymous sources about collusion with Russia. And in fact, when you have these people put on the record, these same people who are probably involved in this coordinated leak campaign to promote this narrative about Russia, when they're on the record, they say, no, we have no evidence of any collusion. And when they come out and say that, it's not a major news story. I mean, Devin Nunes had a big press conference where he pointed that out, and the Washington Post story on it was almost comical in how it went to great lengths to avoid making the point that there's no evidence of collusion with Russia. And you have a lot of the country actually believing this narrative that has been pushed and promoted and carried all by the media for months now.
I think the press is mostly focusing on unanswered questions about dealings with Russia, and obviously, particularly in the case of Mike Flynn, there have been questions about whether or not they have been candid about it and whether they've disclosed it. But is it a fair point to say, if there's no evidence of wiretapping or surveillance, there is equally no evidence that we know of some kind of coordination between the Trump campaign and Russian operatives?
Well, I think both have been covered, and the collusion and the Russian hacking is still ongoing, and I think it gets covered as they come out and say what they know. But in fact, I think we're waiting for the results of that, and James Comey's testifying next week.
Right.
But on the wiretapping, I mean, Tucker did a very good job on this. You know, Trump shifted the burden to everyone else to prove his claim, and in fact, it hasn't been proven. And even Attorney General Sessions came out this week and said there was no evidence.
Well, he said that he had given him no evidence. But, you know, Sean Spicer, in citing all these media reports, he spent 5, 6, 7 minutes of the briefing doing this. He also brought up my colleague Brett Baer. What Brett did was to ask Paul Ryan in an interview about reports about possible surveillance or wiretapping, which stemmed from, it was clear, radio host Mark Levin. So he was in no way vouching for those reports himself. But this goes to your point about citing the mainstream media when it's convenient.
I think it's not a good practice to use as your primary source, if you're Donald Trump, other media reports. And then, as we know, he sometimes takes what his understanding is of a report and carries it further. I know this as well from personal experience. He carries it a little further than the report said.
Where he has mentioned something that you've said and gone a bit further than you had?
Gone further than, you know, when he's talked about me and my reporting sometimes. He's correct in a statement he makes, and then he fills in some amplification that is not necessarily, you know.
That's his opinion.
So, yes.
Is there a sense in the mainstream media that for so long journalists, news organizations have been saying this president was wrong about this, he didn't tell the truth about that, he exaggerated or embellished about this, that, and the other thing, and none of it has stuck. And now finally with this wiretapping surveillance question, aha, we think we have him, we are not going to let up, we're going to keep our foot on the pedal.
Well, yeah, they keep doing that, and it also keeps blowing up in their faces. And I think at the same time, we need to acknowledge that there has been surveillance of the Trump team. We know that because we have been reading about it in reports. We have been reading about it in the Washington Post and the New York Times. Now, are the particulars of what we know because Mike Flynn
but was it targeted at the Trump team, or was it picked up on Russian?
It does not matter. I mean, and also we know that the Obama administration relaxed rules on the sharing of information on terms of names of people who are caught up in this. There has been so little interest in this on the part of the media to understand how is this happening, how is this information getting shared, what is the significance of that, and it's really a shame that it takes Donald Trump, the president, to put it out there in order for us to talk about it.
Just briefly, you have to admit, whether this is a self-inflicted wound or not, the press is loving this wiretap story.
Well, you know, it was the most fantastic tweet of the many tweets of Donald Trump. And so, and when you accuse a former president of doing it and then call him sick, yes, it's news. But then you involved British intelligence and it becomes an international incident.
I'm glad you mentioned that because I want to have a few things I want to say about that. You know, Fox News became part of the debate over President Trump's wiretapping claim when Sean Spicer, at a briefing, invoked a report by Judge Andrew Napolitano, the network's senior judicial analyst. Napolitano had said 3 unnamed sources told him that President Obama used the British intelligence agency to conduct surveillance of candidate Trump.
I didn't make an opinion on it. That was a statement made by a very talented lawyer on Fox. And so you shouldn't be talking to me. You should be talking to Fox.
Judge Knapp is a commentator here, and the news division isn't vouching for his report at this time, but continues to look into the president's claim of wiretapping.
Fox News cannot confirm Judge Napolitano's commentary. Fox News knows of no evidence of any kind that the now President of the United States was surveilled at any time in any way, full stop.
Napolitano told me, I reported what the sources told me, reported it accurately, and I do believe the substance of what they told me. There's been a definite diplomatic fallout. The British intelligence agency called the allegation utterly ridiculous, and London's Telegraph says U.S. officials have apologized. Sean Spicer told reporters he was simply reading media accounts and has no regrets. Cheryl Atkinson, Molly Hemingway, Margaret Carlson, thanks very much for stopping by this Sunday.